All right, we're gonna get started. We're missing one storyteller, but I have all the faith in the world that they're gonna make it. I'm looking at Candace because Candace knows.
Yeah, she'll be here within 5-10 minutes.
Yeah. Rock and roll, baby.
Yeah.
Those musicians. No, kidding. Anyway, welcome. Thank you for coming to Queer Spaces Storytelling Night. I'm happy to have you all here. There's something I have to do before we get started. I did this last time, and I want to take 2 pictures, okay? And you're going to be actors in it. Or actually, what you're going to be is storytellers in your face, okay? So the first picture is just going to be like however you want to make your face, okay? So 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you. Now this picture, the next one, is going to be, I want you to take 1 breath, and I want you to think about a time you were in a queer space, right? And something that happened to you there. Just take a minute and think about that. And then I want you to make the face. When I say 3, make the face that best embodies that. Okay, you ready? Is everybody? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, good night. That was it. Anyway, so welcome to Queer Spaces. This is a storytelling night. The theme is always queer places, the places that make us. Historical, contemporary, virtual, whatever it may be, because we've all had experiences in queer spaces. I feel like it's really important. I started this night because I think it's really important that we, first of all, keep our history alive by telling stories. Second of all, that we establish queer spaces. I believe in visibility and kind of pushing against a lot of people that want to take us off bookshelves and kind of push us into the dark. So this is my meager contribution to keeping that, that going. So tonight we have, oh wait, hang on, let me look at my notes. I feel like I'm missing something. Oh, I know what I'm missing. The housekeeping part of it all. So, if you love queer spaces, independent bookshops, it's really important to support them. You're in an awesome bookshop. Thank you to North Fig for having the night. Look around. There's lots of stuff to purchase here if you have the means. There's they just got these freaking awesome snarky bookmarks. They're very cool. There's used books over there, beautiful new books. There's zines, local authors. So it's really important. So at some point, kind of browse around and see if there's anything you could do to support them in a good, tangible way that they can pay their bills. Second of all, I created this. Sorry, this is the lecture part of the. I created I love the idea of pass the hat. So I created a storyteller tip sheet. So I'm going to just pass this around, and basically if you feel like tipping any of your storytellers and our wonderful volunteer Erika, who I would like to thank, who's filming tonight. Sorry, I'm all thrown off. That was supposed to be, but it's Erika. If you feel you have the means, you can throw them a couple bucks, or just take a picture of this and do it at a later date. I'm going to pass it around and then have it end up just back there, whoever has the last person to put on the counter. I'm also going to put back there a mailing list, to get on the mailing list so you can find out next show. So what's going to happen now? There's 4 storytellers. I'm going to tell a little story first, and then we'll kick it off with the featured storytellers. So anyway, I have to do this. So I'm a comedian at heart. Doing this night has really kind of gotten me thinking a lot about queer space, obviously, but diving a little deeper in my own narrative about the queer spaces I've been in over my life, right? And I always go to when I was in my 20s and all the cool places. I was really involved in the music scene. I'm going to see the Gossip at the Smell. That was a monumental queer space for me. Or L7 at Club Sucker, so I always go there because I want to be cool. But I really thought very deeply about it. I'm like, one of the most significant queer spaces in my life, probably the most life-changing, the most important to me, was actually a space called Moon Shadows. Anybody hear of it? Probably because it's in the
North Hollywood?
Yeah, Judy. Yeah, it's in the San Fernando Valley. It's no longer there. It was like, how do I describe Moon Shadows? Moon Shadows was like the lesbian bar you look for when you're on a road trip, and you're traveling through a town that maybe has like 150 people, and there's only one gay bar in town, and that's it. So that was the vibe of Moon Shadows. It's significant to me because it's where my daughter was conceived. Yeah, we'll get to that. And it's also where I saw like one of my first friends in Los Angeles and best friends for the last time. So it has that significance too. But first, I'm going to describe the decor to you. The decor of Moon Shadows was kind of like when, I don't know if anybody in here watches the sitcom Friends, but in the first season, very early 90s, there was kind of this like in-between time, like very bad 80s aesthetic and like whatever was going on in the early 90s. So in Friends, you're like, why does Monica have such big hair, and why are there so many bows in Phoebe's hair? It's like that weird 80s, bad 80s, 90s aesthetic. So that was Moon Shadows decor. I was going there in the early aughts, so it was about 10 years behind, right? It was like a cool space. You walk in off the parking lot, and there is big space. There was a bar, there was like pool tables, a dartboard, all the lesbian necessities. And then you walk through an archway, and there was like kind of a big dance floor. And it was always very empty, and nobody ever on the dance floor, but they had like a DJ booth, they had a stage, they always had like the lights going and the music blaring in there, so there was that. So the first time, like it was like a second date. It was the second date I was on. We went there, and just because it was kind of convenient, I was living in North Hollywood at the time. So we go to Moon Shadows, and we kind of just wanted to be on our own, away from the other two people that were there. So we made our way to the dance room, and it was just like empty, and we found like a little table that was like against the wall, sat there, and we're kind of just sitting there and enjoying like our time alone, and just like with the music blaring, the lights and disco ball and all that stuff. And we're sitting there and enjoying our time alone. Or so we thought, because we were not alone. As we're talking, we look, and out of one of the dark corners comes this like very femme woman, like flowy dress, like long graying hair. At the time I was like, who's that older woman? But now I'm like, oh, she was like my age. But now. And so she's like coming and doing her femme thing, like dancing out of the dark corner, like Stevie Nicks-ing her way slowly to the middle, where in the middle there was like a disco ball, hanging. And so she's slowly Stevie Nicks-ing her way to the disco ball, and then we're like, what's going on with her? And so then, out of the opposite dark corner, we see this butch, and she's just like has her eyes locked on the femme, and she's doing her slow butch dance heading towards the disco ball. And we're just like watching this happen, and they're slowly coming together, butch doing her thing, femme's like, and then they meet in the middle under the disco ball, and they're like, kind of like they lock eyes then, and they're doing like this, like the circling each other. Well, the butch is actually kind of standing planted, so she's like standing planted, and the femme's circling her like around the butch, and then finally they like embrace, and they just like both lock eyes, and they just start like doing like a ballroom dance, I guess. And me and my date look at each other, and we're like, what mating ritual did we just fucking experience? We were like, what was that? Anyway, so that was like a first early date there. Cut to like 4 years later, this person is now my partner and we want to have a child. So we're like doing basically the turkey baster method, but at the doctor. The doctor had the baster. And sperm is really expensive. We try once, doesn't work, and we want to try again. We're like, it's really expensive. So we decide to put together a sperm benefit. But what place in West Hollywood or, around here would ever have two like Bally dykes have a sperm benefit? Nobody wanted us. It was too dorky. But Moonshadows said yes. So we had this awesome sperm benefit at Moonshadows, and it was like, we had bands play, and actually, there's people, does anybody remember the band Betty Blowtorch?
Of course.
Betty Blowtorch. Some of the members of Betty Blowtorch were like filling in for my friend Mia's band Tadpole, and so I always like to tell people, I'm like, yeah, Betty Blowtorch helped me have my child. Like, they were responsible for my child, or the father of my child. Anyway, so we had bands play, we had like food that people could buy. I, of course, am a carny, so I had carnival games that I created, and we created these like big paper mache sperm-shaped banks. Get it? Yes. Sperm banks. With like a cutout that people could throw money in, and it was amazing. And that night, so my friend who I hadn't seen in a year, his name was Freddie Soto, and he was a comedian. I hadn't seen him, like we just kind of like both our lives got busy. We like kind of like went our own separate ways. But so I hadn't talked to him. Well, I talked to him sporadically. I hadn't seen him in a year, and he came with my friend Jeff, and they totally surprised me. Like, and I was like, oh my God, so in the midst of everything, it's hard when you're a host to like, chill with just one person, but I got to like sit down at the bar and just catch him up on things, like he, the kid stuff, and just had like a really solid catch up at the bar for like 10 or 15 minutes, and he had to go to a comedy show, and we hugged goodbye, and it's like the hug I'll feel forever, So that was the last time I ever saw him. And 2 weeks later, one amazing thing happened. Two monumental things happened. Sorry, I'm thrown off today. My daughter was conceived, and my friend passed away, like within days of each other. It was I was like, in a way I was like, he's responsible for my daughter somehow, right? But that's another story that I'm going to go into. This is the little ending story, because I don't like to end on 6 years later, a filmmaker friend was doing a documentary on his life, so he invited a bunch of us to go to John Lovett's Comedy Store and like do like interviews and stuff. So I go, and I'm walking out with my friend Jeff, the one that went to the sperm benefit. We're walking out with Freddie's wife and just talking, and then she's like, hey, so your daughter must be like, like 4 or 5 years old now. And I'm like, oh yeah, she's doing great. And she's like, yeah, so, and she got like kind of uncomfortable, like, when somebody wants to like say something, but they're really uncomfortable, she's not uncomfortable. She's like, so did you ever find out whose it was? And I was like, what? I'm like, well, we went with like an anonymous sperm donor. She's like, oh, okay. All right, well, we parted ways, and my friend Jeff is like kind of giggling a little. And I'm like, what was that about? And he's like, Fred and I told her that when we were going to the sperm benefit, that we were donating. And I was like, wow, okay, and so yes, that's the end of that story. So it's like the best callback joke in the history of time, right? Okay, I forgot to pass this around, so pass that. That's the songwriter. God, what is wrong with me today? I have menopause brain, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to start the show now with our featured storytellers. I see Josie, hello, thank you for coming. Our first storyteller is Bree. Bree does all sorts of dope shit. This is true. They were published in the first volume of Nasty from King Shop Press. They founded the San Fernando Valley Zine Fest, of which most of the Zine Fest volunteers are here today. And they hosted a queer open mic at Bookshow's Brick and Mortar shop, which is my shop down the street, the longest running thing that happened there for sure. Their small business, Bree is helpful AF, offers sliding scale peer counseling, tarot readings, and consulting through the lenses of community psychology, feminist therapy, and fat liberation. Bree is very special to me. They are one of my closest friends, and I love them dearly, and I don't know what else to say, just kind things. I love Bree.
And I'm going to tell you about the time a gay ghost talked to me through this painting. Yes. I meant to bring the painting, I forgot, so you'll just have to buy the zine to look at it closer. All right. When I first thought about telling this story for Queer Spaces, I was kind of scared it would be lame to tell a story about my own house. But then I got to thinking about how a lot of queer spaces, and really just most spaces in general, are not accessible to me. Sometimes it's the bathroom stalls that are too small for my fat body. Sometimes it's the crowds that are super overstimulating for my particular blend of neurodivergence. Sometimes it's the shitty folding chairs that are shitty for anyone, let alone someone with fibromyalgia and chronic pain. The world is rarely accommodating to me, especially after being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease during a fucking global pandemic. That changed the whole accessibility game, and my home became the only space that was safe for me. Sometimes it's a bummer, but on the flip-flop, it's pretty dope that my home is a safe queer space for me and everyone I welcome to it. Not everyone gets to say that. Now, I should probably start saying our home instead of my home, since I do share the space with my partner Daniel, who's the cute purple-haired person back there. Or really, they shared the space with me. I moved in almost 4 years ago, excited to live in a pink house, and even more excited to live in a haunted house. Left to Daniel by Grandpa because no one else wanted it, the Pink Palace has evolved from being Daniel's family home to our family home. Most of the rooms have their own color schemes. The walls are plastered with John Waters posters and vintage porn and a bunch of art that we've made for each other, which is very cute and very queer, if I do say so myself. The shelves are packed with clown tchotchkes and fat animal tchotchkes and weird oddities that are basically just spooky tchotchkes. With as much random shit as we've crammed into this 126-year-old house so far, there is one presence, a singular presence, that is the through line of our home, and that is the art of Uncle Victor. Uncle Victor's art ranges from sketchbooks full of abstract ink drawings to massive canvases covered in bright colors, bold shapes, and small but mighty wieners. Honestly, the sketchbooks are full of wieners too. He did a lot of mixed media stuff and was super DIY with his art. Like, he did a painting of our house, but the roof is tiled with teeny tiny pieces of cut up Loteria cards. We've also got a green-faced portrait of Daniel framed in pogs. You can see those in the zine. One of my favorite techniques of his is using random objects as stencils, like doilies or dinosaur cutouts. The dude was just constantly churning out super dope art, and he legit never stopped making art until he died. Uncle Victor's art is as big, bold, and colorful as he was as a person. Everything he did was an extension of his creativity. He was so obviously committed to his own personal style that all of his colleagues showed up to his funeral wearing his signature Guayabera shirts. He was a dancer who taught and performed ballet folklorico here in LA as well as in China and Japan. He loved a costume and found opportunities to dress up anywhere, but Halloween was serious fucking business. His sense of humor wasn't for everyone, but I can't imagine he gave a shit. He was a total weirdo who was basically like, fuck your drum, and danced to the beat of his own innate rhythms. Uncle Victor died in 2010, and I moved into the house 10 years later. We all know what happened in 2020. Shit gets fucked. I lost my job first, and Daniel wouldn't get laid off till June. So I spent those first few months of the pandemic mostly alone, smoking a fuck ton of weed, and watching every show I didn't have time for when I was working full-time and going to grad school full-time. One day, I was sitting on the couch, watching the shit out of the show Insecure. I don't know why, but in this instance, the next episode did not start playing automatically. I had been smoking bong load after bong load, which did not stop just because the show stopped. So eventually I did that stoner thing where I was just like sitting in silence and staring into space. And at some point, my gaze had shifted from the TV, which was right in front of me, up and over to the right, where Uncle Victor's paintings, where one of Uncle Victor's paintings hangs on our wall. This one. It's titled Flower Fetishes and features a red creature with wings and horns and a little wiener who's holding a bouquet of flowers. My favorite part, besides the wiener, is the big, bulky, ornate frame that it lives in. I love that tacky shit. Anyway, I was just kind of staring blankly at the painting. Even though I could see it, I wasn't really conscious of it, and my mind was very quiet, which is fucking weird. I'm a super anxious person, and my mind is never quiet. I overthink everything. Should I go to the bathroom now or at the commercial break? Should I wear this divine shirt or that divine shirt? Are my friends pretending to like me? Am I pretending to like me? But in this moment where I'm accidentally meditating on this fucking painting, my highly critical and over-analytical noggin was off the clock. All of a sudden, I heard a very simple, concise statement. Tell him that I'm with him when he's painting. Oh, you're gonna make me cry. Okay. If you've ever talked to ghosts before, you probably know that you don't always hear them with your ears, but in your head. So we're talking telepathic communication, which I know sounds fucking wild, but it is what it is. It just didn't feel like my voice. It didn't feel like my thoughts. It was just like, bloop, dropped into my consciousness. I also received more information than just those 9 words. Without him having to say it, I knew it was Uncle Victor, and I knew that the message was for Daniel. I mean, duh, right? It actually happened a lot quicker than how long it just took to explain it. As soon as I fully realized what even happened, it was over, and the switch in my brain that activates compulsive overthinking was flipped back on. I anxiously awaited Daniel's arrival home when I could finally tell them what happened. So, your dead uncle talked to me through his like little dick devil painting today, and it was actually really cute and sweet because he just wants you to know that he's with you when you're painting. Daniel thought about it for a second and told me that it was kind of weird. But not the part about his dead uncle talking to me. Specifically the part about the word painting. Their grandma was infamous for using words wrong. Like she would use coloring and painting interchangeably. Since we had been coloring the shit out of some coloring books to pass the time in early COVID, Daniel thought the message went beyond the moments when acrylic and watercolors are involved. He knew that it meant that Uncle Victor was right there with us, watching over us and protecting us all throughout that fucked up time. We didn't hear from Uncle Victor again until 3 years later. So I'm talking like a few fucking weeks ago when I was working on this very piece that you are all hearing right now. Me and Daniel were sitting on the porch after just taking our morning walk, and I was asking questions about Uncle Victor. As Daniel was responding, I'd think about the next question that I wanted to ask. In my head, the next question was, what do you think Uncle Victor would say about you and what you're up to now? As soon as I finished thinking that thought, tears started falling out of my face. I'm usually very good at not crying, but this time I was completely out of control of what I was feeling and how my body was responding. Daniel couldn't even tell I was crying yet because I was wearing very cute cat eye sunglasses. So Daniel's just like talking, and I'm just crying, and feeling. There were no words. I was just feeling fucking feelings, and they were not my feelings. Then I realized that Daniel was still talking and I wasn't listening, and that's fucking rude. So I stopped them and I lifted up my sunglasses to show how wet my face was. I started to articulate the feelings that I was feeling, and the words poured out of me just like the waterworks did. Uncle Victor is just so fucking stoked. He's so happy for you that you're coming into your own queer identity and gender identity and like having the freedom to explore it. And he's really, really excited that you've continued to pursue your art and that you want to further pursue it in other ways. I could not stop crying. The tears gushed from my eyeballs with as much intensity as the feelings rushed through me. It felt like an overwhelming sense of pride and deep, deep love. It was pretty common that when extended family members or distant friends of Uncle Victor's would come around, they'd fucking swear that Daniel was Uncle Victor's kid. Daniel looked so much like Uncle Victor that it was inevitable that their relationship would need to be clarified. It was in that moment while crying on the porch that I realized that Daniel is basically Victor's spiritual kid. Not to take away from Daniel's relationship to their mom and dad, but it just became very clear to me that there is a strong spiritual connection between the two of them that goes beyond the ways in which we pop out other humans in that very earthly way of ours. They are very deeply connected. You can even see the similarities in their art. Uncle Victor thinks Daniel is cool as fuck, just like we think Uncle Victor is cool as fuck too. So, I know what it's like to lose someone that I love and miss them no matter how much time has passed. But it's a strange feeling to miss a dead person that I've never actually met. After having such touching experiences with Uncle Victor and learning way more about him, I realize we have a lot in common, and that makes me feel like I'm at least starting to get to know him. We're both Halloween nerds. We both express ourselves through our aesthetic. We both laugh at really stupid shit. But there's one thing we have in common that bums me out, and that's feeling totally fucking invisible. While one of us is invisible because we're just a bunch of energy traveling between dimensions in an unexplainable fashion, the other one of us is invisible because they happen to be a fat, mad, disabled person. There's nothing that makes me feel less like a living, breathing human than showing up to spaces where my body physically does not fit, or where I end up crying for what seems like no reason at all, but I really know the reason is because the music's way too fucking loud. Or where people aggressively rush past me when I'm slowly walking with my cane. I don't feel seen, and my needs are at worst ignored and at best not considered or understood. But in my home, I don't gotta worry about none of that shit, because the people always accommodate me. They're the ones who see me at my best, like when I'm dancing till Sylvester in the kitchen or cheering on my clients as they reach their goals, and they're the ones who see me at my worst, like when I'm being kind of a dick during a meltdown or taking a gnarly dairy-induced dump. They see all the versions of me that most people will never see, yet they care about and respect me anyway. It's a space where people always make me feel included, even when most of those people are dead.
In my house. All right, thank you, Bree. Their house is really cool. You definitely can feel something there. Like, I want to meet your gay ghost. All right, so our next storyteller. I don't normally use my phone because I think it's weird when you're kind of on stage. It's like, excuse me, I have to do some texting. It feels like that, but whatever. I'm Gen X. Our next storyteller is Irene Yu, aka your mother. Your mother is a DJ, a self-proclaimed club mom, rave mom, and stage mom, a community builder, and devoted steward of safe spaces for the queer and underground communities of Los Angeles and beyond. She's the co-founder of Homocult, Les Croix. Did I say that right? The drink, I can never win. And is it 42Q? Where is Irene? Oh, there she is. 42Q? Yeah. All right. And has made multiple appearances at the San Francisco and LA Prides. So happy to have you here, Irene.
Hi. Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Do you want me to adjust that?
Oh, it's okay. I think I can work with it. Bree, I just wanted to say I deeply identify with you as a stoner just staring out into nothing. I get it. Especially like right now. But of course, like in true fashion, hi you guys, my name's Irene. I'm an Aries sun with a Virgo rising and a Virgo moon, so complicated. But I try to stay organized about it. I definitely didn't know exactly what I was getting into when I came here tonight, but that's also how I like to do things.
That's what's fun about it.
I'm in the spirit of Halloween and in the spirit of Dia de los Muertos that's right upon us. I kind of wanted to take this time to honor a friend of mine that's no longer with us. His name is Nacho Nava, and he left a very lasting impact on me and the city of Los Angeles. So I kind of wanted to share a little bit about my time with him with all of y'all. And it's really nice to see some of the faces, familiar faces out here. My name's Irene. I already covered that, but I was actually born in Indio, California. Both my biological parents are from the Coachella Valley. However, I grew up in Riverside in the 909 area. I spent a lot of hot, boring summers in the Coachella Valley, so like, y'all can miss me with that concert. No interest, but yeah, that's where a lot of my family comes from, so I always think that's a fun fact about me, because a lot of people that know me now in this version of my life think that I like hatched out of an egg here in Los Angeles, and that's not really true. As a kid in the 90s, I grew up going to raves on the weekends and kind of just doing my best to avoid a lot of the gangs that were in my neighborhood and in my schools. I didn't identify with a lot of the violence that I grew up around, so I was always kind of trying to find where my space was, and I wasn't even sure what that was because I was still finding my way on who I am. The first time I went to Los Angeles, though, for my very first rave, I remember thinking that I was going to move here someday, and I remember thinking that this was a place that I was going to find myself and call home, and I used to ditch school constantly. I can forge my mother's signature way better than she ever could. Like, I still. But yeah, I used to get out of school all the time and just come out to Melrose, and that was back when Melrose had like 75 actual vinyl record stores between La Brea and Highland. And you would go there to collect rave flyers and pick up party flyers to figure out what was happening on the weekends. This is all pre-internet, this is all pre-cell phone era, so we did what we had to do to kind of like find each other back in those days, and there was a lot more things and variables that you had to use to connect. But I just knew that every week when I'd come to LA, I would always just think like, there's no way that my hometown is going to be able to provide the life that I'm seeing through the eyes of just staying up all night and like coming home at sunrise, and the things that I was experiencing creeping and crawling around in the nighttime. It was just like, I wanted more. I was like, this is it. I want to go there. I want to go there all the time. Fast forward, it's around 2005, and I'm in my early 20s, and I just moved to downtown Los Angeles to an old bank building on 4th and Main Street, and I was absolutely not out yet. I lived with my ex-husband at the time in that apartment, and I met this neighbor on the street, and he had a pit bull puppy, and I remember I just gushed, and I had to meet them both. That guy with the dog was Nacho Nava, and he told me about his club that night at Mustache Mondays, and I didn't know it then, but he was a person who was going to become deeply connected to me in my next life. In 2006, I became diagnosed with choroidal melanoma in my left retina, which is a rare form of eye cancer, and it was a tumor behind my left retina that caused my retina to detach, and I have permanent vision loss in my left eye. And when I say vision loss, I mean I am blind in my left eye. Like, sorry if I don't see you sometimes. Don't take it personal. So I lived in that building, and I received my radiation treatment there in that apartment with my ex-husband, my friends, and my family by my side. I radiated with a radiation implant in my left eye for 7 days there, and I've been cancer-free ever since. My ex-husband and I moved out of that building soon after my treatment, and within the next year we split. And I quickly came out at the tender age of 30 years old. I feel like I'm a late bloomer. I hit the ground running and felt like I had a lot to catch up on. I felt like there was just years wasted that I really, really needed to catch up on. So when I tell you I went hard, I went hard. I actually left my ex-husband and moved back into that old bank building, but into a different apartment, to a different entrance, a different lobby of the building. And this time I also wasted no time, and I moved in with my girlfriend. How quickly time flies, right? I started actually living right directly above Nacho Nava's apartment, and he was living there with Josh Peace and Ashley Miles at the time. And I used to hear Josh and I'd hear Ashley rehearsing every week before the party would go, and there was this big light well that just went up by my living room window, and I would just hear them, and I remember looking at my ex and being like, we should step out tonight, let's go dancing, like let's go out, you know, let's just go. We were only like 2 blocks away from La Cita, so it was a really easy night out every week. It was really easy to go again and again and again, and to make friends was even easier. And the visuals were always just kind of so much fun. There was so much peacocking going on. It was just always like serving looks, big attitudes, bigger looks, you know. The music was always perfect. It was definitely on the fringe of things that were happening within the underground, the art and the music scene, and that's kind of why it became this portal that we all kind of jumped into every week. Eventually I became part of the promotional team and the social media team and started working with Nacho more and more. And during our discussions about community and event planning, we would cover both the positive aspects and the negative things and the frustrations, with occasional gossip here and there. We always make time for tea. Which always brought smiles to our faces, you know. I love getting his calls and just hearing what had happened the night before, or what, you know, just all the things that I missed, and I just kicked myself the next day. But he was one of those people that pushed me, though, when I shared with him that I knew how to DJ, and he was like, what? Like, what do you mean? I had all this equipment in my bedroom that he was like, what? And so he started pushing me more and more to kind of do things and to step outside and to really just believe in myself. And he was also a Capricorn. He was kind of shady too, if you met him. And all tea, no shade. He loved, and I say loved completely sarcastically, but when people would come up to him and tell him like their ideas for his event. I didn't really realize it at the time until I started producing my own events, how like that can hit sometimes. And you know, I would always tell him like, oh my gosh, you know who you should book, or you know who you should work with, or you know who you should bring in. And I would just, you know, pitch it, and he'd go, yeah, that sounds cool, you should do that. And I get it now. I get it, you know. He made spaces that were completely unforgettable for so many different people, and he curated spaces and stages that allowed a lot of big artists that are like onto huge things now, that just started in this like tiny little incubator of a place that we all got to like share time from week to week. I learned a lot from him. That is a fucking understatement. But I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for him. I wouldn't be standing in front of you guys today if it wasn't for Nacho to give me a little bit of encouragement. And he did that for a lot of people. It wasn't just for me that he did that. He was somebody that I called whenever I needed guidance, somebody that I called when I needed somebody like contracts or anything like that. It just was always kind of nice to reach out to an elder in that way that had your best interest in mind and like fully saw you. He was a lot like a dad to me, but he really hated when I referred to him that way. He would correct me and say, gross, I'm your deal. As if he wasn't like a whole year older than me, you know. His ability to curate was like none other, and no one's really been able to do it again since. There were so many talents that came through that place. I'm not even gonna list them because, like, y'all should just do your research. It's cute. He was really, really, really remarkable in the way that he had a keen eye for those who were pushing boundaries and paving the way in new artistic expressions. His legacy lives on through the memories and the experiences to all those who were fortunate enough to be a part of the vibrant community that he created through Mustache Mondays and beyond. The last time I spoke to Nacho was on Christmas Day, 2018. He ended up passing away January 19th, 2019, and he left a profound impact on so many of us in the community that we still gather every year to build and decorate an ofrenda dedicated to him for Dia de los Muertos in downtown Los Angeles. His family, his friends gather around the shrine and we leave him gifts, foods, pictures, letters, coffee and his favorite pan dulces, tequila, and friends like me come and bring him a joint of some of his favorite indica. I wouldn't be a creative person if I didn't know him, and I wouldn't be here tonight if I didn't know Nacho Nava. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for sharing and bringing us all into that. You know, it sounded just like a magical sliver of time and a wonderful person, so thank you. I just met Irene tonight for the first time, but I saw her DJ at one of my friend Vanessa's events, like maybe, I think it was like a Dyke Day fundraiser, like maybe like a couple years ago, and then filed her away in my head, like, she's so cool. And then when Vanessa was like, oh, you should have Irene come down and tell a story, like, yes, so thank you again. Our next storyteller is Josie Reck. Hang on, I gotta text somebody. Josie Reck is a chaotic, experimental post-punk Chicana artist and musician from Santa Ana. Over the past 15 years, she has worked to improve trans representation in Southern California underground, booking events under her production Oral Displeasure, and was also a central organizer for Rock and Roll Camp for Girls, Orange County, where she taught girls and trans youth the power of music as a vehicle for empowerment and change. I love that. When she is not playing in her 5-piece noise orchestra Sexperience ensemble, really I wanted to keep that in this intro because I wanted to say that really. And I'm going to say it again, actually. When she is not playing in her 5-piece noise orchestra Sexperience ensemble, Rec does nonprofit social work connecting community to mental health, domestic violence, and housing resources. She's most recently curated the inaugural annual music festival Displeasure Fest, toured the Pacific Northwest, released a raw 3-song EP. She's preparing to release writings and new music before the end of the year. I just have to say that I became enamored with Josie at Candace's wedding, where she did a toast, and I was just like, I'm so enamored with this person. It was such a beautiful, heartfelt toast, and I was like, storytelling night. That's so I'm happy to have Josie Rack here. Come on.
Hi. Thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for the invite as well. I appreciate it. My name is Josie Rack, and I scrambled to write all of my thoughts onto paper, so I will be struggling reading my own writing. So let me just put that out right now. Okay, good. Now, I have a couple stories in mind, but and more. I don't know if I want to lead with ad lib and end on a strong note, or start with a strong note and then let it fizzle out and have y'all change your opinion if you like. So I think I'll start with what's written in front of me, and then we can all struggle with my own writing. Okay. Queer spaces. That's the prompt. I was 16 years old when my best friend, my best friend's queer older sister Lena, invited me to a show. I was a sophomore in high school and had no concept of what shows were back then. I was raised in an overprotective Mexican household by two traditional, loving, naturalized immigrant parents. Middle child to an older brother and younger sister. I snuck out through my bedroom window like I'd seen teenagers do on TV screens. Hopped into Lena's family car, and their mom, Irene, drove us to the venue. See, it was on this car ride that Lena disclosed to me that the show was being held at the LGBTQ Youth Drop-Off Center on Garden Grove Boulevard. I remember feeling both tense and excited about that. Were gays gonna be there? Will it be safe? You see, we only had access to tragic stories of queer kids getting thrown out of their homes and getting disowned by their families when we were growing up in Orange County. Would that happen to me if my parents discovered that I'd been surrounded by gays? Jesus. We entered the space and walked down a long hallway where we were met by a short, black-haired, mask-presenting person who took donations before granting us access to the show. We entered a large room with a lot of open space, streamers, holographic banners, and other faggot-ass decor hung all along the walls. Folks of all shapes, sizes, backgrounds, and gender presentations were either socializing with one another, standing alone, or watching the live band. A tall, plus-sized, brown, femi-gay guy in colorful clothes and prescription glasses was dancing and shouting into a microphone from behind a synthesizer as he pressed down on various keys, while his bandmate, smaller in frame and stature, in black chucks, black tee, black dicky pants, and matching jacket with a short black pompadour, was rocking back and forth, tearing it up on electric guitar in time with the pre-programmed drum beats coming out of the aforementioned synthesizer, also yelling into the microphone. They announced that they were called $3 puta. And of course they were. It's Rudy Blue, also known as Queer Punk Disco on Instagram, and Raquel Contreras. Presently, I would describe their sound as queer electric clash informed by the likes of Gravy Train. But back then, I had no idea what I was witnessing, other than it was loud, dancey, energetic, and homosexual as fuck. They were followed by an intricate indie pop rock three-piece comprised of 3 women, 2 sisters on drums and guitar vocals, and a friend on bass. They were called Augie. Their set blew me away. I had just started tapping into my love and obsession for women and femmes in punk and rock and roll by way of Gwen Stefani, Hole, Babes in Toyland, the Guano Apes. Shout out if any of you heard of them. Yeah. Oh my God. Yes.
Oh my God.
I love that.
Yes.
The one person. I need that, at least one, and I appreciate the enthusiasm. They were the very first, but this was my very first time experiencing it in front of my face. I was enveloped in a feeling of comfort and acceptance, and fell in love with both sets that I watched, which presented a new issue for me, as I'd never been in this conundrum before. I had no idea how to access their music. I didn't know what that meant. See, because back in the day, the only way that I could access music was through FM radio, the Columbia House CD catalogs, and I know I'm really dating myself right now, and my older brother's CD and tape collection. That was the only way I could access music. So I didn't know what to do. Like, I was like, how do I listen? How to get this into my ear holes? Where were we? Augie didn't have merch, but Rudy from $3 Puta sold me a copy of their album, Songs from the Bedroom. He signed it and made it out to my dead name, effectively making it the very first piece of band merch I ever owned. And I still have it. I'm gonna get it bronzed. I wound up playing it in its entirety on my podcast during lockdown. There will be a trigger warning for the next story, but that was the first show I'd ever went to in high school. And some of you may have heard this story once or twice, but this time I'm writing it down intentionally. Several months later, a new best friend of mine named Lish invited me out to a punk show. I'd never heard of the band before, but apparently the guy used to be in a band that all these cute punk rockers in high school worshipped. Black Flag? Okay, cool. This dude's band was called, now brace yourself, it's really creative, the Greg Ginn Band. Featuring Greg Ginn, formerly of Black Flag. They were playing at this all-ages venue called Chain Reaction in Anaheim. I don't remember how we got there, but we did. We made our way through the parking lot and approached the ticket booth next to the entrance, got our tickets, and made our way inside. The vibe and environment were blaringly different. There were a lot more people, first of all. And the crowd could not be more visibly heteronormative. With pairs and groups of teenagers in punk and suburban cosplay. Like bondage pants and suspenders, jeans and Happy Tree Friends tees, intermixed with dads and weird older punk dudes in sleeveless band tees, flannels, and beer bellies. Lish and I arrived while some random pro skater dude was on the stage doing some cross-promotion bullshit or something. The headliner goes on next, the Greg Ginn Band. Wow. Jeez Louise. Looks like a group of 40-year-old dads playing chant-along punk songs, none of which I recognized. But hey, all the cute guys liked them in high school, so. And they had a pit going. Bodies were colliding into each other during every song. At some point during their set, this spiky-haired, dykey hard femme hopped onto the stage during one of their songs. Plaid miniskirt, fishnets, chucks, and all. She jumped alongside Greg Ginn and started singing along into the microphone with him. And this, even to this day, is one of the coolest fucking things I've ever seen at a show. Like, it felt like it just came out right out of a movie. Lish and I made eye contact and our smiles widened and we just started fucking dancing and going wild during it. Didn't know any of these fucking songs or who these people were. But fuck yeah, hard dyke fucking femme up on stage. Yes, she was rocking our world until there was an abrupt change in the vibe. Greg Ginn stops strumming his guitar. He turns to face this femme dyke and he lands a punch straight across her face. She stumbled back and fell against the wall on stage. The band played another bar or two before stopping the song because of the commotion. You see, this punk dyke was not going down without a fight. Yeah. She was yelling obscenities at this old fuck that sucker punched her as they were dragging her off stage. And Greg Ginn began taunting them and their best friend over the microphone. He was mocking the words being slung at him, like poser, fuck you, Black Flag sucks. Inciting the crowd to boo and get these femmes out of the venue. Lish and I locked eyes again in disbelief as security escorted the teenage punk femmes off the premises while they yelled back at Greg and the fucking idiot audience. I think the skater dude was leading a chant to kick them out too. We stood there in shock when the whole room cheered after these two got thrown out. The two of us silently knew it was our time to go, and we were the only two people to walk out of Chain Reaction in solidarity. It stopped feeling like a safe place to dance or to lose yourself in. And with the snap of a finger or with a 40-year-old fucking white dude's fist against a 15-year-old's face, the whole vibe changed and you just had to keep your guard up. We ran into the girls as we were leaving the parking lot. I believe we bumped into them as we were reaching the sidewalk. They were drunk, confused, angry, and hurt that one of their favorites just assaulted them on stage, with valid reason. We empathized and supported every single word that came out of their mouths. Fuck Greg Ginn, fuck Black Flag, never listening to any of their records again. I never even started. I'm already right there with you. We spent about 15 minutes commiserating together before it was our time to go. I forget the friend's name that was there, but the heroic punk dyke introduced themselves as Candace Hansen. And we heard earlier, I spoke at their wedding a few months ago, and it was a beautiful thing. And what can I say? Dykes make the world go round.
Yes.
Yes.
We didn't have the term safe or safer spaces back then, but we knew that spaces for queers, femmes, and people of gender expansive identities and presentations needed places for us to be able to take up space without worrying about generic old white men and the assholes they inspire to cause us harm. These shows were in 2001. In 2023, bigots, xenophobes, transphobes, homophobes, and conservatives are seeking these spaces out, and all entities that support them to shut them down and to inflict violence. This is your call to action. Wake the fuck up. We need you here. Thank you. I also started trying to identify what queer spaces meant. What are queer spaces? Besides the physical, of course, and the physical is incredibly important, of course, but I was like, let me list some things off. My phone is a queer space. The lenses on my camera have captured moments of queer joy and queer ecstasy. My brain is a queer space between these two temples right here. My past, my present, and my future is gonna be fucking queer as fuck. My heart is a queer space. So is my mouth and my throat. And so are my panties and what lies beneath my skirt. My dreams and desires are queer spaces. Every time I'm perceived, I send you to queer spaces and depths in your mind. Queer spaces have a warmth to them. Locking eyes with someone when you're making your way through the veranda towards the restrooms at a nightclub. It's a pretty queer sensation when there's electricity involved. Especially when they're sitting next to a cis petite pretty girl at a table along the side. And I don't like to overanalyze the types of looks that get directed my way. I've learned years ago not to wonder, not to fuck with it, not to give a fuck about it. You've heard this time and time again. You can never tell if they're gonna fuck you or kill you in a lot of places. A lot of instances with trans people, it's both. And femmes and women for sure. So I don't like to wonder, if someone's into me or whatever, but when I making your way into the bathroom and receiving a message from the same person while you're on your grinder, that was a pretty clear signal that they were interested. I sent him a message saying, hey, do you want to dance? He said, sure. I was like, oh, there's another green light, I'm down. So we make our way onto the dance floor. He abandons his cute petite friend. I pull out poppers out of my purse. Poppers are pretty queer, I think. And how many of you are familiar with what poppers are? Oh my goodness! Okay, great. Well, it's just little fumes of happiness and delirium, I think. And doing them with the hot guy with the salt and pepper and goatee framing his pretty smile on the dance floor is pretty queer, and eventually later making your way to your car to hang out, get to know each other is pretty queer. Leading into scenarios of making out, listening to music, porticide usually, I think. It's a pretty sensual experience. Porticide's queer as fuck. And hooking up. And he told me he was a Pisces earlier in the night, actually, and I said, "Oh, are you a crybaby?" And he smiled. And then while we're doing poppers, making out later in the evening, he starts getting emotional. He's like, "I really wish I should have just invited you out to dinner. Like, I didn't want to rush this." And he starts crying while I'm stroking his dick. It's just a weird time to say that. I mean, I'll go with it. That's the thing about me. I like to just roll the punches. I like to get creative, So we tone it down. I'm like, okay, we could just chill. We could listen to music. We could talk. We can continue doing poppers. But the thing is, while we were doing the poppers in the car, he announced, "Oh shit, I spilled the poppers," while I was giving him head. Well, we start, we de-escalate, we start centering ourselves, we start talking about going out again, and then he falls asleep. I start dozing off. I still got to get back to Santana. So I quietly let myself out of the car. He says, "Hey, I want to take you to dinner for reals." I said, "Okay, sounds great." And then I shut the door. I go home and I don't hear from him for a few days. I text him, to check in on him, and it turns out that he had an awful experience. You see, because when he said that he spilled the poppers, the container still wasn't empty. So he told me that he wound up waking up with the hugest fucking migraine, alarmed. His heart was racing, like it was going to explode out of his chest, and he didn't know what was going on. There was chaos. He rolled down the windows. He knew he was just struggling, and it turns out he was hotboxing poppers the entire fucking night after I left. Don't make that mistake, queer space. This is an educational moment for all of us. I think that was a queer space right there. I desire cock as much as I desire connection, depending on the day, or on where Venus and Mars are positioned, or in what house the sun squares Pluto in. hurt me the way you know how to best. By giving me love, support, and tenderness. Except for in the way that this loneliness yearns for. There you go. That's it.
Our next, I keep wanting to say songwriter, but it kind of makes sense tonight, I think. Most of you are music people. All right. Our next storyteller is Candace Hansen. Candace Hansen is a musician, journalist, zinester, organizer, educator, and scholar. They are currently a PhD candidate at UCLA, drumming for bands like Alice Bag and Dimber, and freelancing for LA Times and Spin, covering queer and trans music, art, and culture. At UCLA, Hansen teaches courses from lesbian and trans film and TV to equitable music pedagogy. Right? Is that how you say it? I'm always for music teachers. Obviously, I'm not getting my PhD. They are currently working on a dissertation about affect in the queer underground. And I know Candace through my very good friend Rachel Curry. And Candace is just this person who I think I barely knew you, and you were helping me move out of my store and paint walls and stuff. And so Candace is just someone who like jumps into the queer community, is there like full on to help everybody. So I'm really happy to have you here, Candace. Come on up.
Oh my God, there's so many people here. I feel like my bio maybe sounds so stuffy, but that's my professional bio. Hi everybody, thank you so much for being here, and thank you Jen for having me. I have been a part of so many queer spaces in my life, but for some reason, I think maybe because this is in a retail space, I just kept thinking about the retail spaces that were so important to me as a young queer kid. But I feel like, oh God, there's so many just like messy, being a dyke barback during the recession in a messy fucking gay bar, like I could just have a whole other time to talk about things, or lesbian processing in 2007, like for radical organizing, that doesn't need to be brought up again. We've all been there, but Josie knows. But okay, so I'm going to read a little bit about, I just wrote this week, so please forgive me if it's like not good. I'm going to read a little bit about just being a working class queer punk and accessing queer culture through retail spaces. So people always say mall punks like it's always such a bad thing. There are certainly contradictions. The tension of an anti-capitalist way of being in such proximity to the manufactured post-war fantasy of commodity culture as identity formation, rooted in mid-century white flight and American notions of the nation-state and family formations through the consumer economy. The juxtaposition of poor punk teenagers drinking 40s in front of a Wolfgang Pucks is not something I'm trying to argue for more than what it was, a fucking mess. But sometimes, even if you're raised in a culture that you can't really access, the mall is all you have. As a working class queer punk kid coming of age in Orange County, you'd find yourself shopping at a lot of stores that you had absolutely no intention of buying anything at. Partially to soak in the vibe of the records, movies, skateboards, and cool skater punk boy fashion that you couldn't afford and desperately imagine yourself wearing every day. Maybe this is an experience of being poor in a suburban wasteland, picking up where my mother left off, window shopping but never purchasing as therapy on odd days off, spending Sunday afternoons cruising the 99-cent store on Harbor, the Rainbow Village thrift store on Euclid, the Cypress swap meet, letting me and my brother buy something for a few dollars, which always felt like a Christmas revelation. Even though Orange County, and specifically Garden Grove where I grew up, had a hidden queer history that was and is still kept from queer youth, growing up in the 2000s, there was not a lot of explicitly queer spaces. There was a lot of hatred of queer people. So by virtue of existing as a queer freak in such a hostile place, you were queering that place and fucking shit, it needed it desperately. When I was 15, I met somebody who would become chosen family at the 99-cent store on Harbor, of all places. I was sneaking around the aisles in my femme best that Josie described so gorgeously. I have to say, I looked at a picture, I was cute. I did a good job. Even though I wanted to look like Darby Crash and was giving Brody from the Distillers, I was still giving something. Okay, so just We have to hold respect for that. Oh, I even wrote it here. In my hard femme vest, a chopped up mini skirt, and most definitely a discharged never again shirt. Shoplifting spiked soda that they had just started selling at the 99-cent store, when across the room I saw the most gorgeous riot girl bear I had ever seen. My friend Rain, who would become my friend, was wearing a DIY made whole Live Through This Dickies Messenger bag, along with a work shirt with fuzzy cheetah just like fucking put all over it, like randomly. And I was like, yes, this is my soulmate. Like, I need you in my life now. And so I stopped trying to steal alcohol and I started stalking the aisles trying to become friends with this person. Who I think got scared of me and started trying to get away from me. It became like a very hilarious queer game of cat and mouse. I saw him finally in the face from behind a stack of sun-bleached popcorn and dog food. I abandoned all my stolen alcohol and ran out the door. And we became friends. And after one failed date that was really awkward with a no-tongue kiss where we watched The Craft in his neon orange bedroom in his trailer park, we figured out that we were both really fucking gay, as if our obsession with Courtney Love independently wasn't enough evidence. And we're still friends. And he became super close with my mom, and we're going to take her to see Orville Peck in 2 weeks, so we still talk. So taking up space in malls and in strip malls and in theme parks in Orange County was a big part of being a counterculture street punk kid in OC. It was our duty to be annoying and look as punk as possible. Punks used to hang out and drink 40s in the gutter behind Knott's Berry Farm and at downtown Disney, especially after they made the mistake of booking a ska band to play in front of the Rainforest Cafe 3 times a week, which has become a cultural touchstone for elder millennials of North OC of a certain age. My crew and I would ride the train from the parking lot to the park that we couldn't afford to enter, blasting the Subhumans on a little purple Nickelodeon boombox, and we'd take pictures of the tourists for $1 until the security kicked us out. Knott's was always much kinder than Disney. But we established a game of cat and mouse with these security guards at Disneyland. And we definitely gave them purpose on those slow days of trying to find lost balloons, pointing people to the direction of the Sephora that was recently built. We'd yell at them that Mickey Mouse was a rat and that they were fascists as they herded us over old hedges surrounding the south parking lot, which ironically is where they keep cats that they rescue to kill mouses after they close the park down. This is this open secret that if you live in OC, everybody has tias and uncles and grandpas and stuff that work there, so that's a thing that happens. So anyways, they would chase us over the same area where those mouse couchers lived. So the deep irony of all of us punk kids who grew up on the other side of the brick walls that separated the Disneyland compound, built on entertaining children who used the Disneyland fireworks to tell time after dark, knowing it was 9 p.m. in the summer or 7 p.m. in the winter once we seen Mickey's face illuminate the sky, like the panopticon that Foucault warned us about, who attended elementary schools named after Disney corporate employees and saw the world through a Disney lens, and we took the bus on Harbor, craning our necks to try to see the Matterhorn to cheer us up on those hard days, trying so desperately to soak up the last promise of youth from the gutter outside of Tomorrowland and being chased out will never be lost on me. I was one of the only queer punks who was out in Orange County when I was in high school in the Y2K, a very unfriendly time to be queer. When I came out, my group of guy friends and band members drinking Steel Reserve around a fire in a park that we had to sneak into. Even the public parks are gated in Orange County. It's so fucked. We snuck into the park, had a fire, dangerous, and I told them, I was like, guys, I have something to tell you. I think I'm gay. And they were like, dude, no way, you're like the coolest chick we know. Like thinking I was saying I would like sucked because that was just like what gay meant in the Y2K. And I was like, no, like I'm a fucking gay. I'm gay. I'm a fucking lesbian. I'm a carpet muncher. I'm a fucking dyke. Like all the slurs. And then finally they're like, oh. And they still needed a drummer, so they kept their mouth shut, you know? So it was around this time I started playing drums all the time. I was one of the only drummers in the scene, and so I made a name for myself pretty quickly. I played in crust bands, ska bands, I subbed in goth bands. I also play in the orchestra sometimes now, today. I I played in so many fucking bands, every fucking band. And I played in these really bad 1977 style punk bands with creepy grown straight men because I got really good and there were just no drummers. It was kind of a miracle for me. And so what this meant was I actually had access to leaving Orange County. So I played all over OC, LA, the Inland Empire. I got to go to fucking Europe. I had never left Garden Grove, essentially, except, very rarely, to go to LA. I got to play CBGB's the year before it closed when I was a teenager. It was nuts. One of the first out-of-town tours I ever did was to San Francisco when I was 17, and we played at a drag bar called Chemo's that had punk shows at night. And it was my first time in a gay bar, and because I was underage, and clearly underage, I would get kicked out immediately after the band would play. If anybody else is a musician and you were young, you know how this works. You play the gig, you have to wait outside. Usually everybody else in your band is also 17, but these guys were like 27. So I was just stuck out fucking side all the time. So I remember that show sucked because I was depressed. I was like sitting in a van in the street and I was just looking at gay San Francisco, just being like, I'm here, but I'm not, but like it exists. Thank God. So I had this weird thing where like as a kid, it was like I was exposed to these sites. One of the other places I used to play a lot was the Allen Theater in Southgate. I don't know if anybody ever got to go there. It was incredible. I used to play there in all the bands I was in all the time. And there was this incredible punk band called Threatening Verse. I don't know if anybody ever saw Threatening Verse from Southeast LA, but that was like the coolest queer punk band nobody ever knows about. And there was an amazing butch who used to go by Pixie, and she would always come and say hi to me at the merch table. And of course, when the men after the show would go and socialize, who's relegated to the fucking merch table? Always the dykes. So she was so kind to me, and there was other dykes that I would see working sound, or, it just gave me like, oh my God, like, yes, I can get out of this. I'm not trapped in the van and up in front of Chemo's forever. I can have a life. And so, yeah, I mean, it meant so much. Like, she even let me book her punk band in Orange County when I started throwing shows as a teenager in a shed outside of a church next to the Moose Lodge that my mom is a volunteer bartender at today. Yeah, these moments of queer recognition meant a lot because the punk scene in Orange County was so homophobic. My home wasn't a safe space for me and my mom. When I wasn't in school or gigging or working with my mom at a termite control company, I would always walk or take the bus to all the record stores or punk stores that I could. Hot Topic at the Westminster Mall. Yes, bitch. Stray Cat Vintage, Ipso Facto, Bionic Records. Too many to name. When my friends got learner's permits to drive, we would drive in the middle of the night to Hollywood to look at everybody outside of the clubs, but we couldn't go in because we'd get kicked out. So we would just drive by, like, on Hollywood Boulevard and see all the cool sex workers and everybody leaving the shows and just be like, wow! Like, I mean, not in like a creepy tourist way. It was just like, we just needed it. You know what I mean? We just fucking needed it. And we were just in love with just seeing everybody's fashion and yeah, the ravers, it was just incredible. We used to do it all the time, and then we'd drive back. And 20 years ago, with no traffic, it would take 35 minutes to get from Hollywood to Garden Grove. It was kind of a miracle. And yeah, so we would also go to stores at home. So going to stores to pick up flyers and pick up zines like the OC Weekly or Scratch Magazine or Destroy All or All Ages that were always on the racks, because these zines gave you an opportunity to see beyond your reality. And going to these shops would get you in proximity to really cool people. You get to hear about what records people were listening to, and you would pray to God you'd find another freak like yourself. Some of us in North OC were lucky enough to find refuge in the aisles of Flashbacks, a vintage store in Orange off of Chapman and Tustin, and a classic suburban strip. I was across the street from some surefire signs of a suburban wasteland, a beeper store, a Vans outlet, and a gargantuous Chevy dealer with a giant mid-century spinning logo in the sky that probably cost so much money to operate. But it was at Flashbacks that I met the first trans elder that I would ever know. I remember seeing her germs and Go-Go's tattoo from across the room. Flashbacks was the kind of vintage store that I desperately wish still existed. The racks ranged from punk bootleg shirts to flyers to 50s and 60s stuff to wacky disco jumpsuits. It was just amazing, and all the flyers that covered the wall were from Kimberly's collection. I remember asking her, because I saw her tattoo and I was trying to be cool, do you like the germs? And in the Y2K, having a germs tattoo was flagging that I'm gay, I'm wounded, and I'm angry. She told me all about going to punk shows in the 80s, how much she loved the Go-Go's, hardcore, fashion. She actually asked me questions about myself, about the bands I liked, the crowds that I was a part of, what tattoos I wanted. She told me that pirates were cool and were like anti-racist, and I don't know if that's totally true, but she had a theory. She just told me all kinds of cool shit. She never told me about her transition, but I never asked. I just assumed that was always the way she was. Beautiful and kind and punk as fuck and willing to take 2 hours to tell some annoying little queer kid about sweat, queer history, and bad sound systems as if it were a sacred text. And now the guys that were in the popular 77 band that I went to CBGBs with were so fucking homophobic and transphobic, especially to me. But I remember them bringing up things about Kimberly once when we were driving to San Diego to play a show with a brand new band at the time called Cheap Sex, which is awful. They're not good. Anyways, they were like one of those charged hair, glue hair. I mean, I was a glue hair at this time. No shade to anyone who was glue hair, but you know, it was a moment. Anyways, we're driving to San Diego, and they were just like obsessed with talking about her sex change, her divorce. How could a trans woman be married to a woman? Was she trans and a lesbian? How horrible. I learned that Kimberly's kids had disowned her, in hindsight the most heartbreaking thing. And that, you know that TV show, channel TLC, the Learning Channel? They had done a special about her in a docuseries about trans people coming out later in life. In hindsight, I see now that we needed each other in that moment more than I could have ever realized. Kimberly passed away in 2015, and I wish I would have kept in touch with her beyond our interactions at the store. I was sought out actually from an Orange County queer punk history perspective to look at her archive last year. And as I thumbed through hundreds of pictures of unknown bands, Kimberly looking so adorable and young and happy, the man who now owns her collection misgendered her, dead-named her, and even told me that he used some of her ephemera in an exhibition about what Orange County punk was without ever citing her or telling her story. Her leather jacket was the centerpiece of an installation at Chapman College about what Orange County punk was and what it has come to be. And the fact that it was worn, created, and loved by a trans woman who not only fought to take up space in Orange County against the most hostile conditions, but also ran an institution of queer fashion in a fucking suburban wasteland next to a beeper store, didn't seem important to the curator, but he was well-meaning. My germs tattoo that I got when I was 18 is in the exact same place as hers was. It wasn't intentional, but I do think about it when I see it. Another place I'd frequent was the Block at Orange. Anybody ever go to the Block? Yes, bitch, yes. Where I would sit on the sidelines of the Van skate park because I couldn't afford the admission. And one time I met this really cool queer punk from Mexico who had a bunch of tapes in his backpack, and he gave me a bunch of tapes, and I used to listen to them all the time, and I wish I still had them. And Jonathan from Roman Graves used to work at the Spencer's Gifts, and I remember thinking they were so fucking cool. They were a little bit older than me, so I thought I needed to impress them, so I told them that my ska band was going on the Warped Tour, even though we weren't. And it's so embarrassing because now we're very good friends. I was awkwardly thumbing through Sexy Mints and looking at the blacklight posters and just trying to be cool, and it just meant so much, you know, to be in spaces with people like this. A few years later, when I befriended Jonathan at Girl Fair, which is one of the only recurring queer and feminist punk art events in Orange County that lasted over a decade, I was so excited to meet them, and I didn't even realize that they were the same person from the mall. I used to read about Girl Fair in the OC Weekly, and just the dream of being able to attend that before I ever did made me feel like there was a lifeline outside of the street punk community that had become both a lifeline and a trap for me. Girl Fair was my feminist foundation, and is where I found myself and my chosen family. There were no queer music venues and very few DIY venues. So one of the spots, Josie, that was me. I was the hottie, battling Greg Ginn. You know, so I have very few fond memories of the DIY spaces there. But what's sad is there is actually a lot of queer history in Orange County. As a queer historian, it's wild to think about how all the spaces that we had to queer out of necessity are in proximity to actual sites of queer resistance that have been kept from us. So many of them were connected to histories I didn't even learn about until so much later. So Girl Fair, which was a feminist punk rock music, art, and Skillshare festival that happened in Santa Ana from 2001 to 2011, was spearheaded by Jonathan for many years, but it was started by a woman named Paula Arnett at that LGBT youth drop-in center in Garden Grove that Josie talked about. They threw punk shows, they fed queer kids in need, they had a shower, they had so many resources. I wish I would have known about that at the time. When I started producing programming at the LGBT Center in Orange County, I learned that the majority of the elders didn't want it to be noticeable. They didn't want to have a sign, and they didn't want it to be an obviously gay space. And doing research later in life, I learned that the original Orange County LGBT Center in Garden Grove was across the street from the house I grew up in the first 5 years of my life. It had been the victim of many violent attacks, including an arson by way of firebombing in the 1980s. When I learned this, I took my mom out to lunch and asked her if she remembered it, since it was on the same corner we lived, especially since her best friend Michael passed away from HIV shortly before I was born in the late 80s. I've heard stories my whole life about how they used to joke around that he was my father, and sometimes I think about him as my little guardian angel that I never met, which is so sad, right? Sorry. Ew, gross, gay, emotions. She said she remembered the fire, and the coworker that went with us to lunch said he knew the guy that did it. Apparently, straight men in Garden Grove in the 80s, it was an open secret. Garden Grove was home to dozens of gay bars during the 60s through the 80s that were all raided all the time and time again by police. In fact, the chief of police even suggested jokingly that Garden Grove police should just injure queer people upon sight. Only one gay bar remains in Garden Grove today, the Frat House, a queer bar off Beach Boulevard that hosts drag shows. There was a history of queer resistance in Orange County along with all this hard shit. In 1974, queer people marched in Garden Grove across these police raids, entrapment, and predatory arrest demanding respect. Trans women collectives in Yorba Linda, Santa Ana, and Irvine held conventions in secret hotel lobbies and conference rooms, even at the Queen Mary, sharing knowledge about how to get hormones or access clothes. Trans women collectives made newsletters like Renaissance, a zine made by and for trans women started in Costa Mesa in 1976. In fact, there was a psychologist working in a strip mall in Santa Ana in the 1960s, leading support groups contributing to providing trans-affirming care at a time when it was not popular to do so in Orange County or anywhere else. A trans mask meetup used to happen in the 70s around the corner from where we would meet to plan Girl Fair. ACT UP and Queer Nation had Orange County chapters. One of the only traces in the archive I have found is an early 1980s shop-in at South Coast Plaza, which is like a really fancy mall, which I used to also try to take pictures with tourists for $1. They went into the mall in a bunch of shirt and buttons that said gay shopper during the HIV/AIDS crisis. Apparently only a few other people joined in with them. As fucked up as it is in Orange County, the mall, the shopping center, these wasteland iconographies are our commons. The mall was more accessible than the library. I even went to continuation school after getting kicked out of high school in a fucking strip mall. The experience of turning to retail isn't totally suburban. I think all teens in the pre-internet age turned to retail cultural centers as rites of passage en masse. The specific conservative Orange County suburban thing that I keep thinking about in hindsight is how Orange County middle-class religious conservatism, routed through the stern white teachers and classist, racist, homophobic school administrators, pushed so many troubled but smart queer kids and kids of color to the margins of education. We would spend hours reading books and magazines, sitting on the floors of malls and newsstands, just to learn about art, history, music, and culture that made us feel less alone, doing the same shit the good kids were doing in libraries, just with more drinking and petty theft. In hindsight, because so many of us were desperate for mentorship and community, they threw us out of school for dress code violations, behavioral issues, and expected us to bootstrap fantasies our entire lives with no support for ourselves or our families, essentially turning education, caretaking, and culture to the private sector to take care of kids whose people also worked multiple jobs in the service economy that fueled the entire Orange County way of life. Please don't mistake this grappling with queering spaces as a love letter to retail. Rather, grappling with the meaning that so many of us queer working class people make out of our lives and the spaces that we have to navigate as young people figuring shit out with all that we've got. It's not a breakup letter either. Thank God I had Girl Fair, Rock Camp, all the messy gay bars in Long Beach, Gay Pride, the 99-cent store, and all those other great places. But before all that, at least I had the block at Orange. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's so crazy. I didn't know there were gay people in Orange County.
I know. Isn't it crazy?
That was awesome. I like the idea of also just making every space queer, you know, wherever we are, right?
Yes.